drawer boxes. Dovetail jigs are back, baby! So next up, we're gonna start working on the drawers. Now, of course, the drawers have their own box with a bottom, and then there's a false front that goes on the very front of the cabinet. That's another area, just like our sliding doors, where if you wanna do something different than what I do, you totally can. You can go more traditional, you could do just a solid piece of material. The thing is, we're gonna get to that later. The boxes should be all the same, no matter what your drawer, the false front looks like. The rest of the drawer is gonna be pretty straightforward. So, should you use really expensive stuff for the drawer? Probably not. Generally speaking, with a drawer, I like to go with a wood that's a little bit less expensive, but still, you know, decent. I want this to be solid wood if possible. The drawer bottom, you know, for that, we'll probably use plywood. Normally, I go with a light color. I think drawers' interior spaces just look better if it's light. The problem is, I had to buy some walnut plywood, and I've got it here, so I'm probably gonna use that. It'll be fine. But anyway, the wood I'm gonna use is my B stock here, and this is alder. Now, depending on where you live in the country, you may or may not be able to get alder. It's fairly inexpensive. It's also focused a little more on the left half of the country. Here in Missouri, and we had no problem picking some up. So this is just 4/4 alder. We're gonna mill this down into our individual pieces. There's quite a few. There's only 4 drawers, but if you multiply it out, there's a front, back, and 2 sides for each drawer, so it adds up. We're gonna chop them down into the parts, and then we're gonna start to mill them down to thickness. Now, lots of different ways that you can make drawer joinery. Simple rabbets, reinforced rabbets. In this case, we're doing fine furniture. I wouldn't recommend some kind of a butt joint, but you got some options. One other thing is dovetails, of course. And a lot of people like to cut them by hand. Absolutely no problem. But it's kind of funny. We had a talk on this, about this on Wood Talk recently, about how dovetail jigs seem to have fallen out of favor. I don't really know why. Whether it's in favor of other types of joinery or hand-cut dovetails, I'm not totally sure. But I remembered that I have a dovetail jig, and these are pretty, you know, there's quite a few of these to do. This is a good candidate for using something like a dovetail jig. So the problem is, whenever I use this thing, I have to break out the manual, and I have to sit down and read it and make some practice cuts before I'm confident enough to work on my actual drawer stock. So all my drawer pieces are back here safe and sound. And I have 2 extra pieces that I milled to the same exact dimensions in width and thickness. The length doesn't matter. I'm gonna be testing on the ends, and if it doesn't work, I'm gonna lop it off and test again. So I'm not gonna drag you through this setup and test procedure. We'll just go right to the actual cutting, because all this sort of pertains to the type of jig that you use. We'll jump right into it, but I definitely have to do some tests before I find the courage to go to my actual final material. Now, it's all coming back to me. All the little tips and tricks that you need to know with a dovetail jig to get good results. And I was able to get a test run going. Looks pretty decent, certainly good enough for what we're trying to do here. And that's basically all you do, is make a pin and a tail board, test them out, refine it so you know what you are in for. But let me give you a couple of tips that will help you have more success here. One is to have 2 routers, if possible, because you have a straight bit on one, and then you have the dovetail bit on the other. As you go through the calibration process, one of the steps is setting the depth of this bit. Well, what would really suck is to have to take that out and then put the straight one back in, only for the test subjects, right? And then we have a whole bunch of these other ones that we have to do later. So you're going back and forth, and it's a mess. So if you can, 2 routers, totally the way to go. Then you could lock them into their settings. Another tip is to make sure you use some kind of a backer board. So when you have your pieces in, you're plowing your material out, you could very easily get a lot of tear out on the back. So if you have another piece, and I'll be using these test pieces, I'm gonna drive a test piece in like this, and that's gonna actually back up the material. So I have wood supporting it at the back end. When the router bit goes through, we should get nice clean cuts. Another thing, you're gonna wanna know the thickness of your material and mark a baseline. Now, you could do that with a pencil, and that'll kind of help you when you're doing the setup of your router bit. But the problem is, it doesn't help you with tear out. So I have a cutting gauge here that's actually set to the exact thickness of the work pieces, and all we really need to do, just kind of run on the outside. You don't need a real heavy duty line. This is not for visual purposes. It's just slicing the grain and making it so that when that router bit comes through, it's not going to tear that grain out. Do that on all sides of all boards. Okay, now this is one of my pin boards. On the pin board, you really only need to worry about this on the 2 faces. And the reason is because you've got half pins on the sides, right? On the tail boards, however, this is one of my side pieces, a tail board. On these, you are going to remove stock from the side. So I'm going to not only do the face, I'll walk around, hit the side as well to establish a nice clean baseline there. That's going to get all 4 sides. And that will definitely help ensure you get some nice clean cuts. And now for me, this process starts with my tail boards. There's an organization system with markings, what's facing out. It's all going to be very specific to the particular jig you have. So read the manual. All right, so I've got my backer board in place here. I'm going to bring my tail board up till it's on the underside of these little guide pins there, which have been adjusted for the spacing I want. This is really no frills here, nothing too fancy in the spacing. And I've got a nice tight connection there, so I should have all those fibers backed up. Got my dovetail bit. And I know this thing has a dust collection deal. I don't know, I think this is for this, but I don't know how to hook it up, so dust is gonna go everywhere. I could probably look it up, but I'm too lazy. All right, let's cut some dovetails. All right, so with all the tail boards done, we can switch over to pin mode. Now, this jig is actually really cool because these fingers are dual purpose. We flip this thing over and now we have the side we need to create our pins. We'll do that in a second, but I did want to show you with the routers, I actually have 2 routers. I'm going to keep one set up with my tail set up in that dovetail bit. The next setup requires switching the bit to a straight bit because we're actually going to follow the guides themselves have angles on them that's going to create the angle that we need. So you need a straight bit to do that. I like to do 2 routers for this because if I have a mistake that I need to fix, or maybe I need to cut a new part later on, I can actually cut that part to the same size and my routers are already ready to go. But you don't need 2 routers to do this. It's just like an insurance policy at this point. So we're gonna flip this thing over and get ready to cut the pins. I'm gonna cut the first one as kind of a test and it will fine tune the fit. Let's loosen this hoochie. Flip it over, there we go. And put it to the, what does it say? 1 increment above the 1/2 inch. I'm just gonna take my test piece in here, bring it up to my guides, clamp that in place. Now this board was already chewed up when we did our tails. So what I'm gonna do, give myself a fresh edge like this, bring that right up against the back of my workpiece, snug it up, and now we have additional support. And we're gonna do a test run. Let's see how it goes. Looks clean-ish. So we're gonna take this guy out of here. Let's see what we got. Now this one was just a test piece. It's not gonna be that clean of a line because I didn't scribe it. So we're gonna take our test piece and one of our sides. This is an outside, that's an inside. Okay, I can tell you right now, it's a little snug. So we're gonna have to make an adjustment. All right, so I'm just gonna go about 1/2 a line, and a lot of this is very jig specific, so I'm not gonna spend too much time on the details here, but we make a nice fine adjustment. And while I can just widen these out and put this back in there, I think I'm gonna start with a fresh cut. Think we got it? Are we any better? Got some frayed material here, so we don't want to let that skew our results. Oh man, that's pretty damn tight. I'm a little uncomfortable with that, especially in the softwood. It will probably go if we force it, but I would like just a little bit more wiggle room than that. Oh man, it's so tempting because it is so close. All right, let's make one quick adjustment, very slight adjustment, and see if we can't get better results. All right, and I think we got it this time. This is the kind of fit we're looking for. All right, that looks pretty good. All right, so before we move on, let's go ahead and do a little bit of a dry assembly with one of our drawers. And that's the good thing about using a jig like this, is if one works, they probably all work, unless you screwed something up. It's a good fit. Got to keep in mind, when you add glue to these joints, they're going to swell up. So that's why we're really striving for a finish or a finish setting that actually has these pieces easily sliding through without too hard of a mallet hit. As soon as they get a little bit of moisture in there, they're going to swell and become much more difficult to insert. It's looking pretty good. Everything's sitting fairly flat. So at this point, I recommend making sure you know all your inside surfaces and your outside surfaces, because we need to cut a 1/4 inch groove for our bottom panel all the way around the interior. If you like this kind of long form instruction, you're gonna love the Guild. Here are just a few of our incredible instructors.
So this is really good technique learning about reference faces.
If you're putting pressure on the bevel, you're gonna cause problems and usually get that kind of vibration in the cut.
I'll be trying out a couple new techniques, new to me.
This plane doesn't flatten, this plane makes it pretty. This is a plane that flattens.
Whether you're new to woodworking or you're just trying to step up your game, the Guild offers top-notch video instruction that will guide you through every step of the build. And if you have trouble, we won't leave you hanging, since you can ask your instructor questions right on the website or discuss your project with your fellow Guild members in our various communities. With over 60 courses to choose from, you're sure to find something that piques your interest. The Wood Whisperer Guild, the next best thing to an in-person class. Now here at the table saw, we're going to cut that groove. I've got my standard blade here. This happens to be one with a square top on it. It's going to give me a nice flat bottom, but we don't absolutely need to have that. You can use your alternating bevel blade here. What we're going to do is 2 passes to make our groove. I'm going to set my fence so that the distance between the fence and the start of the blade is a 1/2 inch. That's going to mean that my bottom panel will be a 1/2 inch from the bottom of my drawer side. We're going to test the blade height now. So we're actually going to make a single cut on this test piece and just confirm that we are a 1/2 inch in and a 1/4 inch deep. All right, so just a quick confirmation. We got the 1/2 inch from the bottom here, as well as a 1/4 inch depth for the depth of the groove. So we're going to take 1 pass on all of our work pieces, then we're going to adjust for a 2nd pass. All right, so now I'm just going to move my blade over, or move my fence rather, which will move my blade. I don't want to go a full blade thickness here because the plywood I'm using is going to be undersized, right? It's not an exact 1/4 inch. So I'm going to give it maybe a 1/2 of a tooth. This is something we can sneak up on, so I don't want to get too nuts with it. All right, so this is about the fit I want to go for here. The reason I don't want it to be super snug, it's pretty good. And you see there's a little bit of movement there. When you're putting a drawer together, you have this bottom in place and you have to have this bottom sinking into 4 pieces. And plywood is not always dead flat, right? So you're trying to get all 4 of those to go in at the same time. You want a little bit of wiggle room, trust me. So that's looking pretty good. So now with this groove set, we could do all the rest of our pieces. Now I'm going to take 4 of my front and back pieces. See, right now, the way this works, these parts are the same, whether it's a front or a back. We're going to commit 4 of these to become backs by doing a little notch here. That notch is for our slide hardware. This is just stuff that's dictated by the manufacturer. So we're basically going to do a notch that sits right under this panel. It would basically go right up to the bottom of our bottom panel, and it starts a 1/2 inch in, right? Because we're going to have a 1/2 inch workpiece sitting in like this. So that notch is a 1 1/4 inches from that 1/2 inch line. So let's see, 1 1/4 is going to be right about there. So the piece we're going to remove, the area we need to remove, is this stuff right here. Right, so we're going to just nibble that away at the table saw. So to make this cut with a single blade, which by the way, you can switch to a dado stack. I'm just being lazy right now since this is already ready to go. And I'm going to do a double stop situation here. So if I use my fence as 1 stop, I can mark that 1 1/4 inch line. I mean, if you do the math there, that's 1 3/4 inches because we have a 1/2 inch here, then 1 1/4, right? So we're going to get that line established with the fence. Then the other side, when we shift this way, will stop us using our built-in stop on the miter gauge. So I'm just looking at the teeth to get that lined up. That looks pretty good there, so let me double check. Boop. Yeah, pretty good. So this cut will just be a series of nibbles with one stop, then we work our way over to the other stop. I guess it will pop off that bottom dovetail. I forgot about that. Now you might be wondering about us losing that bottom pin. That's actually something I didn't anticipate, and it is not really a big deal because look how many pins we have left. This is also something that's going to be at the back. This is at the back of our drawer, so it's really not a big deal at all whatsoever. But think about the ways that you might be able to avoid this. Well, if you use different joinery, that's certainly, like if these were just rabbets, it would be no big deal. But in this case, if you have any kind of dovetail down there without making some weird, ill-proportioned dovetails and pins, I don't know that there's really a great way to avoid that. So I'm not too fussed about it, but I did want to be honest here and let you know that I wasn't expecting that piece to fall off. Jason even said, hey, are you going to lose that bottom dovetail? I said, nope, I'm going to cut right up to it. Well, I guess those mean the same thing. But I am not worried about it, so that's looking pretty good. Now with another one of my drawers dry assembled, we could start to think about our bottom panel. You have plans with numbers that will tell you what this is, but it's always better to put things together, take an actual measurement. Now what I like to do is to account for that groove depth, I just kind of make a pencil mark on either side to say 1/4 inch deep, and then I could simply measure like this. Right? And whatever that number is, write it down. It's going to be plywood, so it can be a fairly snug fit. Doesn't have to have room to expand and contract, but get your width and your depth. Then we're going to cut that out of this big sheet of 1/4 inch ply that we have over here. We're also going to cut our back panel out at the same time, so let's go take that measurement real quick. We should have enough to get all of these out of one sheet, but it's nice to know so we don't accidentally like orient the grain the wrong way and wind up consuming a lot of material. Okay, now that we got the panels ready to go, let's see if we can do a bit of a dry assembly here. Yeah, let's get that together first. Here's the thing, dovetails, the more times you assemble them, the easier they get to put together, especially if you're dealing with softer wood species like this. So just keep that in mind. You want to minimize the number of assemblies you have to do. It's not a huge deal, but I can feel these getting looser and looser every time we put them together. That's a drawer. All right, with the dry assembly done at this point, we could just add the glue. So we have to do the same thing over again, just adding glue to the joints. All right, so once the glue is dry on our drawers, we can give them a little bit of a sanding just on the outside edges. We don't want to get too nuts, but just clean them up real nice because the next step is to install some hardware. We have some undermount slides that need to go in, so there are actually more things we need to do to these drawers, but for now, we'll just clean them up. All right, so next thing we need to do to our drawers is install the hardware that will allow us to put the drawers into the compartment in the case. So let's talk a little bit about our drawer options. So one of the most traditional things you could do with fine furniture is make wood slides. Lots of variations that you could do there, but wood slides generally are not as functional. You can't get them to extend so that you get full extension on your drawers. They also are susceptible to changes in humidity, right? So they might wind up getting looser or tighter depending on the time of year, and there are better options out there. So one of those options is something you're probably familiar with, and that is a full extension side mount slide. slide like this. Now these are very heavy duty in the sense that they take a lot of weight, but the real problem with these, especially in a project like this that we consider to be fine furniture, is the fact that you have visible hardware. So every time someone pulls a drawer out, they get to see a little bit of lubricant and grease that's on there, as well as the slide itself. Now you can actually get these slides in different colors, at least black I know is one option. I think that's definitely a more elegant choice, but still, you're still going to see the hardware there. There is another option that I find a little bit trickier to install, but it's an undermount slide. Let me show you one of those. Now over here, I've got an example of an undermount slide. So check this out. Well, you don't see anything, do you? That's the idea. It's under the drawer. These also tend to have that sort of slow close, soft close. It's just a nice, elegant way to do things. And if you're making fine furniture, you kind of want your hardware to fit that theme as well. So this is what these slides look like. They would go into the case side, or I guess you could mount it to the bottom if you needed to. But you got a little hook back here that goes into the back of the drawer. This whole section goes under the drawer bottom, and you'll see how we install that in a little bit. But the whole idea is it's all hidden. Everything is happening behind the scenes. They take a pretty good amount of weight as well. Installation, that's the tricky part. They're a little bit harder to install, especially when you look at the instructions from a company like Blum. It's like it's in a different language. I mean, it's all in metric, which is fine. We could do the conversions, but I do find their instructions to be quite complicated. The good news is once you install a set, there are certain parameters that are kind of consistent. As long as you're not doing dramatically different drawer side thicknesses and changing things, you just got to remember those rules and use that same set of slides each time and you'll be fine. All right, so let's go through the process of installing these slides on our drawer boxes. All right, so here's some of the hardware. I showed you the slide already, but there's another component to an undermount slide, and that's what they call a locking mechanism. This is why this stuff looks really intimidating. I mean, look at how many things are going on with this locking mechanism, but trust me, it's actually pretty simple when you have all the numbers worked out. This slide would go under this side of the drawer, kind of like this, so you never see it. Let's flip it over. And this locking mechanism just goes right up here in the corner. We're gonna drive a couple of screws here, and that just locks it into position. And you might be wondering what all these little doodads and dials do. That's all for drawer adjustment if you wanna fine tune the placement. And with any luck, we won't have to touch them at all. And this little spring-loaded thing here is how we release the drawer from the rest of the slide. So let's get on with the installation of these components onto our drawer itself. What's gonna help us with that is this little jig. Okay, so the first thing we're gonna do is drill a hole here at the back, and you might now understand why we had to notch the drawer backs, because this piece of hardware has to sit in here like so. And this little teeny tiny pin there, that guy has to have a hole to go into, because this is also part of the adjustment mechanism. So with that in a hole, we can move this dial up and down and kind of tweak the position of the back of the drawer. It's actually super clever. So to get this done, we're going to use this jig. There is a hole guide, a little bushing in there. If we set, here, look at this side first. See this middle area here? This is guiding us for where this thing is to be located. This slot here is for our drawer side. And depending on the thickness of your drawer side, that may change. So that's why the slot's really big. We're going to reference against this middle piece here, right? So I'm going to drop it in like this. And you see we have side-to-side movement. I'm going to push it this way so that we're colliding with that little piece in the middle there, right? And then I just push it all the way till it stops. And that is where we drill. Now, of course, this all calls for metric. It says a 6mm bit. What I have is, I believe it's a 15/64. That's close enough. This is a depth gauge, and if you have a stop collar, you want to use it. I do not, so I'm using tape. This will tell me how deep I need to go. All right, now I'm going to switch sides here because I am right-handed. And once again, just so you can see what we're doing here, up against the inside edge, push it. I'm going to hold it in place, just drill till my tape bottoms out. Or in this case, it might just be a through hole. Did it go all the way through? No. Now on the other side, do the same thing. We're just going to push until the center post here makes contact with the inside edge, and we'll drill. That one went through. I guess you're really not supposed to go through because you don't want to see those holes, but if you're a little overzealous and maybe my tape is getting pushed back a little bit, you will go through. So sorry, Nicole. There's a hole in your drawer. And now we'll flip it around so we could work on the positioning of our locking mechanisms. I should mention, I should have mentioned it before, there's a left and right to everything. These are not all the same. So you have left slides and right slides. You have left locking mechanisms and right locking mechanisms. So you need some of each. Right, so this one would be positioned right here, and we need to pre-drill for a couple of screws. And once again, that's where this comes in handy. So on the other side here, you have this positioning jig, which allows you to just kind of go right up in here like so. And if you look at the screw holes here and here, they coincide with these little marks that I placed because you have multiple options here. I guess different locking mechanisms might have holes in different locations. So this will tell us where we need to go, but here's the trouble with this. What we're supposed to do is take this tiny bit, which this is also sized, by the way, based on a hole here, right? And that also gives you the depth gauge, same as the other one. So when I slide this guy in, oops, wrong way. I'm supposed to pre-drill going through that hole, and it is at a slight angle. That's real hard to do with a drill. So you need some sort of a extension on here or a pin vise or something to get that thing started. You know, given the fact that this is alder, I really don't think we're gonna have any trouble just using this guy itself and drilling our screws directly into the wood. If this were a harder species, I might be a little bit more cautious about that. So I'm gonna come through and just do a light pilot hole. So just come in, try to replicate that angle. Boy, this bit is not sharp. All right, so this bit hopefully will work a little bit better. Oh yeah, it actually worked. That's key. And I definitely don't feel the need to power this guy in there. Oh, that might be too long, huh? I got shorter ones. All right, so I got slightly smaller screws here. And we don't need to get too aggressive with this. All right, so let's get the other guy in there.
It's almost lunchtime.
It's almost lunchtime, everyone. Now, before we proceed with the rest of the drawers, I want to test the installation, which means I want to put some slides in. Now, the way I'm going to install these slides, they're at very specific heights, and we're going to use some shims to support the slides and locate them. In order to do that, we have to build from the top first and work our way down. If we install a slide here at the bottom, then we have something that's in our way to build a stack of shims, right? But I want to test all this out, just make sure everything is working. So I'm going to quickly and temporarily install our slides on the bottom, because the bottom first set, they just sit on the bottom face frame here, so they're pretty easy to locate. The only thing we need to do is make sure they are set back from this front divider edge by 1/8 of an inch. And what that does is when the drawer closes completely, that extra 1/8 of an inch just makes sure we still have the sort of spring-loaded soft close action that brings our drawer front nice and tight up against these dividers. So I'm going to use this up against the divider like so, and I'm going to bring the slide in until it makes contact, and then we'll be able to pre-drill and drive the screws. All right, so I know you can't see the details just yet. I will show you that when we do the final install. I'm just getting these in position for a little bit of a test run. All right, so now's the moment of truth. There's a little bit of blind faith in things like this. You have to have the measurements just right, and if everything is just right, this should pop in with a fairly satisfying click. You just slide it on top of the guides, and we're just gonna push back and hope we hear it. That's what we're looking for. All right. That is installed. So I think at this point we're safe to now install the rest of the slides. Let me show you how we're going to do it. Now to help us with this installation, I've cut a series of shims. They're all cut to the same size, which is kind of nice. It's 5 3/8. This is going to give us the heights that we need. And this is the reason why I didn't want that bottom slide in, because I'm going to build up and we have to go from the top down to make this work. So each shim will stack like this. And then we can install our first slide here at the top. Once that one is in place, we could take the top shim away, like that. Then we'll install our second one, right? And then take that one away and install this guy right here. So pretty systematic. It's really hard to mess it up at this point. And I'll show you a few tricks along the way as we get this thing installed. Now it might be a little bit tricky to hold everything in place. So I'm gonna put a pencil mark for my 1/8 line here, just to make sure I know exactly where I am. And I've got a visual reminder. Another thing I'm gonna do to help this, because when you have these pieces stacked, they will buckle and just kind of fall apart. I'm gonna tape the pieces together with some blue tape, and that'll make my life a little bit easier. Bring this guy up and make my life a little bit easier with a clamp here. Try to line up with my pencil mark. If you've got your square handy, you can bring that over too, just to have a nice firm guide. I'm just going to do 2 screws to get the process started here. We can always add more later. That's good. Let's do the next one. You know what? This would be a lot smarter. I'm going to do it the hard way so we don't have to reposition our cameras. Since this is set up, you'd want to do the right side before you take the tape off. I'm going to, just for you guys, waste some tape so we have a little more continuity here. There we go. With one section removed. Now we go to number 2. And for the final section, okay, rinse and repeat here. The bottom one, we already have the holes pre-drilled, and that just rests right on the bottom of the case. All right, now I'm just going to repeat this process on the other side, and I'll see you when it's done.
Yes.
All right, so we got the other side of the slides installed, and now we could drop all of our boxes in. The good thing about this, when you have the numbers this accurate and this consistent, you could swap your drawers. Any drawer should fit in any one of these spaces. They're not married to a position. You know, if these were loaded down, now that I think about it, this thing may want to be anchored to the wall. We got to keep that in mind. Boom, baby. All right, the next thing you want to do here, just double check. You have the opportunity to finesse the locations of these slides if you need to, but the most important thing right now is that you do not have drawer front interfering with this surface here, because we're going to have a false front sitting on there, and we want to make sure we make good contact with this divider. And these are either pretty close to flush or just a little bit behind, and that's what we're looking for. I think that's good. All right, so that's the story of the drawer boxes. Next up, we got to make drawer fronts. Next time on The Wood Whisperer. I love to try to come up with cool ways to make functional pulls and things that don't actually involve true metal hardware. At least a nice even 1/16 of an inch gap between your drawers. You can go a little bit bigger if you want some wiggle room.